This evening we are going to read Luke chapter 22, verses 35 through Luke chapter 23, verses 49. Then Jesus asked his disciples, "When I sent you out that time without purse, bag, or shoes, did you lack anything?" "Not a thing," they answered. "But now," Jesus said, "whoever has a purse or a bag must take it, and whoever does not have a sword must sell his coat and buy one. For I tell you that the scripture which says, 'He shared the fate of criminals,' must come true about me, because what was written about me is coming true." The disciples said, "Look, here are 2 swords, Lord." "That is enough," he replied. Jesus left the city and went as he usually did to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples went with him. When he arrived at the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." Then he went off from them about the distance of a stone's throw and knelt down and prayed. "Father," he said, "if you will take this cup of suffering away from me, not my will, however, but your will be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. In great anguish he prayed even more fervently. His sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Rising from his prayer, he went back to the disciples and found them asleep, worn out by their grief. He said to them, "Why are you sleeping? Get up and pray that you will not fall into temptation." Jesus was still speaking when the crowd arrived, led by Judas, one of the 12 disciples. He came up to Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said, "Judas, is it with a kiss that you betray the Son of Man?" When the disciples who were with Jesus saw that what was going to happen, they asked, "Shall we use our swords, Lord?" And one of them struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. Jesus said, "Enough of this!" He touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests and the officers of the temple guard and the elders who had come there to get him, Did you have to come with swords and clubs as though I were an outlaw? I was with you in the temple every day, and you did not try to arrest me. But this is what your hour to act when the power of darkness rules?" They arrested Jesus and took him away into the house of the high priest, and Peter followed at a distance. A fire had been lit in the center of the courtyard, and Jesus joined those who were sitting around it. When one of the servant women saw him sitting there in the fire, she looked straight at him and said, "This man too was with Jesus." But Peter denied it. "Woman, I don't even know him." After a little while, a man noticed Peter and said, "You are one of them too." But Peter answered, "Man, I am not." And about an hour later, another man insisted strongly, "There isn't any doubt that this man was with Jesus, because he is also a Galilean." But Peter answered, "Man, I don't know what you are talking about." At once, while he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. The Lord turned around and looked straight at Peter, and Peter remembered that the Lord had said to him, "Before the rooster crows tonight, you will say 3 times that you do not know me." Peter went out and wept bitterly. The men who were guarding Jesus made fun of him and beat him. They blindfolded him and asked him, "Who hit Jesus?" And they said many other insulting things to him. When day came, the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law met together, and Jesus was brought before the council. "Tell us," they said, "are you the Messiah?" He answered, "If I tell you, you will not believe me, and if I ask you a question, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the Almighty God." They said, "Are you then the Son of God?" He answered them, "You say that I am." And they said, "We don't need any witnesses. We ourselves have heard what he said." The whole group rose up and took Jesus before Pilate, where they began to accuse him. He caught the man misleading our people, telling them not to pay taxes to the emperor and claiming that he himself is the Messiah, a king. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "So you say," Jesus answered. Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no reason to condemn this man." But they insisted even more strongly with his teaching. He is starting a riot among the people all through Judea. He began in Galilee and now has come here. When Pilate heard this, he asked, "Is this man a Galilean?" When he learned that Jesus was from the region ruled by Herod, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at the time. Herod was very pleased when he saw Jesus because he had heard about him and had been wanting to see him for a long time. He was hoping to see Jesus perform some miracle, so Herod asked Jesus many questions, but Jesus made no answer. The chief priests and the teachers of the law stepped forward and made strong accusations against Jesus. Herod and his soldiers made fun of Jesus and treated him with contempt. Then they put a fine robe on him and sent him back to Pilate. On that very day, Herod and Pilate became friends. Before this, they had been enemies. Pilate called together the chief priests and leaders and the people and said to them, "You brought this man to me and said he was misleading the people. Now I have examined him here in your presence, and I have not found him guilty of any of the crimes you accuse him of. Nor did Herod find him guilty, for he sent him back to us. There is nothing this man has done to deserve death. So I will have him whipped and let him go." The whole crowd cried out, "Kill him! Set Barabbas free for us!" Barabbas had been put in prison for a riot that had taken place in the city and for murder. Pilate wanted to set Jesus free, so he appealed to the crowd again. But they shouted back, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them the third time, "But what crime has he committed? I cannot find anything he has done to deserve death. I will have him whipped and set free." But they kept on shouting at the top of their voices that Jesus should be crucified, and finally their shouting succeeded. So Pilate passed the sentence on Jesus that they were asking for. He set free the man they wanted, the one who had been put in prison for riot and murder, and he handed Jesus over to them to do as they wished. The soldiers led Jesus away, and as they were going, they met a man from Syria named Simon, who was coming into the city from the country. They seized him, put the cross on him, and made him carry it behind Jesus. A large crowd of people followed him. Among them were some women who were weeping and wailing for him. Jesus turned to them and said, "Women of Jerusalem, don't cry for me, but for yourselves and your children. For the days are coming when people will say, 'How lucky are the women who never had children, who never bore babies, who never nursed them.' That will be the time when people will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Hide us.' For in such things as those are done when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" The two other men, both of them criminals, were also led out to be put to death with Jesus. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there and the two criminals on his right and on his left. Jesus said, "Forgive them, Father. They don't know what they are doing." They divided his clothes among themselves by throwing dice. The people stood there watching while the Jewish leaders made fun of him. "He saved others. Let him save himself, if he is the Messiah whom God has chosen." The soldiers also made fun of him. They came up to him and offered him cheap wine and said, "Save yourself if you are the king of the Jews." Above him was written the words, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." The other one, however, rebuked him, saying, "Don't you fear God? You received the same sentence he did. Ours, however, is only right, because we were getting what we deserve for what we did, but he has done nothing wrong." And he said to Jesus, "Remember me, Jesus, when you come as king." Jesus said to him, "I promise you that today you will be in paradise with me." It was about 12 o'clock when the sun stopped shining and darkness covered the whole country until 3 o'clock, and the curtain hanging in the temple was torn in two. Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Father, in your hands I have placed my spirit." He said this and died. The army officer saw what had happened, and he praised God, saying, "Certainly he was a good man. When the people who had gathered there to watch the spectacle saw what happened, they all went back home, beating their breasts in sorrow. All those who knew Jesus personally, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance to watch. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.